Commander Thorne's voice crackled over the open channel, devoid of the panic currently paralyzing my bridge crew. "We don't have shields, Captain," he said, his image steady despite the Obsidian Reaver dreadnought locking its primary plasma lances onto his hull. "We have resolve and 6 inches of tungsten-reinforced plating. The universe is vast and often silent, but sometimes it screams for a witness. If you want to hear the chronicles of those who stand when others fall, subscribe and join our ranks. Now, let's look at how a merchant ship found itself in the middle of a war. 6 hours earlier, the primary cooling fan in my cabin had developed a rhythmic, annoying tick. It was the only sound in the quiet of the merchant vessel Stellar Merchant until the distress frequency shattered the peace with the jagged, terrified screams from Vertex Prime. As a trade coordinator, I had seen my share of border skirmishes, but the sensor ghosting near the mining colony was different. It was heavy, dense, and unmistakably Obsidian Reaver. My scales itched with a cold, instinctive dread. We were a freight hauler, a glorified metal box with short-range thrusters and 0 teeth. We could only watch the long-range feeds as the Reavers began their methodical harvest, their thick armored hulls shrugging off the colony's pathetic automated turrets. I was calculating the time until the nearest military detachment could arrive, too late, always too late, when a hole tore open in real space. It wasn't the shimmering blue of a standard warp jump. It was a violent, tearing white. Out tumbled a ship that looked less like a vessel and more like a serrated slab of charcoal. "The TRS Bastion," the newcomer announced. My database returned a frustrating null result. Their hull was a patchwork of dull plates, lacking the iridescent shimmer of energy shielding. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as they drifted between the Reavers and the fleeing civilian shuttles. The TRS Bastion begins a violent axial rotation, its hull glowing white-hot as it absorbs a direct plasma volley that should have vaporized any known vessel. This is just the beginning of their stand, so subscribe to ensure you're here for the counterstrike. The rotation was a desperate, mechanical dance. By spinning, the Bastion distributed the thermal load of the plasma across its entire surface, preventing a single point of failure. It was primitive. It was insane. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I watched the thermal sensors on my console spike into the red. On the Bastion's bridge, Thorne hadn't blinked. He was waiting for something. Between the pulses of fire, I noticed a series of long, hollow tubes extending from the Bastion's flanks. The echoing rail, a weapon system that looked like it belonged in a museum of ancient kinetic history. He was bringing a hammer to a glass-blowing contest, and the Reavers, blinded by their own perceived superiority, were closing the distance for the kill. The lead Reaver ship surged forward, its forward emitters pulsing with a final, blinding discharge. The Bastion didn't flinch. It stopped its rotation, locking its attitude thrusters with a violent jerk that sent a shower of sparks from its venting heat sinks. They didn't come from a paradise, I realized as I watched their structural integrity warnings bleed through the open comms. They came from a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill them, and the Obsidian Reavers were just another storm to be weathered. The tubes on the Bastion's flanks, the echoing rail, hummed with a sound that vibrated even through my ship's sensor baffles. Inside my bridge, the gravitational sensors spiked. It was a localized distortion, a primitive buildup of magnetic force that felt heavy and thick, like the air before a lightning strike on a gas giant. The Reaver captain began to broadcast a mocking surrender demand, laughing at the lack of shields on the charred debris before him. The laughter died the moment the magnets released. And now, under the shadow of the colony's moons, the silence of the void was torn apart. The Bastion didn't fire light. It fired mass. A 3-meter slug of solid tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, slammed into the lead Reaver vessel. The pirates' sophisticated energy shields didn't even flicker. They simply weren't designed to stop a physical object moving that fast. The railgun slug punched through the bow and exited the stern, bisecting the dreadnought as if it were made of parchment. The remaining fleet scattered, but the Terrans were already moving with a sickening agility. Without the weight of shield generators, they used that mass for thrusters. They dove into the thick of the formation, their point defense cannons spitting a hail of lead that shredded the Reaver's delicate sensor arrays. It was a hammer in a glass-blowing contest, a brutal reminder that physics cared very little for elegance. Within minutes, the pirate fleet was a collection of drifting, silent husks. The Bastion didn't pause to celebrate. It immediately pivoted, its massive hangar doors groaning open to reveal medical shuttles and structural repair crews already prepped for launch toward the burning colony. The transition to the Nexus hub was a quiet affair. I watched from my viewport as the Terran ship docked, its hull scarred, blackened, and utterly triumphant. In the Galactic Council chambers, Commander Thorne stood before the representatives of 1,000 worlds. He looked small until he spoke, defending their ancient kinetics and their refusal to look away when the vulnerable screamed. I looked at the data slate on my desk, the same one I'd used to calculate their certain death hours ago. Beside it sat the small, rhythmic cooling fan I'd finally fixed. It was steady now. I watched Thorne offer a predator's smile to the High Adjudicator, a baring of teeth that I now understood wasn't a threat, but a promise of protection. Power without accountability is tyranny, he had said. They simply chose to be the shield. The cooling fan hummed a perfect, quiet note in the corner of my cabin. That metal blade, once just a source of irritation, now looked like the most reliable thing in the galaxy. The Terrans used their teeth to smile, but they used their resolve to hold back the dark. If you're ready to see what other legends are hidden in the stars, subscribe and don't miss tomorrow's dispatch. What would you do if you had the power of a death world behind you?